I grew up with my mum and dad and two younger brothers. And at the age of 6, my mum and my dad had a massive falling out, and my dad left the family home. So he upped and left, and my mum took that pretty hard. She began to drink. She became an alcoholic. She would often be found in pubs drinking while I was at school with my brothers. I would often take my brothers to school, and then after I would go into town and go around the pub systematically looking for my mum to get the house keys so I could take my brothers home, feed them, put them to bed, and then my mum would come home later drunk, and I would feed her and put her to bed. That was everyday life for me and for my brothers. And I took on a lot of responsibility as a young kid because of my mum's drinking and because of just the nature of what that did to her. She would often leave us with people on weekends who would babysit for us. They would sometimes be friends of my mum's or family members. And one of those was an older cousin of mine, a male older cousin. And when I was around the age of 7 or 8 years old, whenever he babysat for us, he would do some pretty horrific things to me sexually. And that was a really dark time in my life as a young man. I became quite placid. I became aggressive at times. I would flip from being a really calm kid to a really angry kid at the drop of a hat. And my grades were suffering. My schoolwork was suffering. Teachers could tell there was something going on. And throughout this time in my life, my grandmother, my mum's mum, I would stay with her on a Friday night. She was a devout Catholic woman. She was really into church on Sundays, baptism. She had more pictures of Mary around her house than she had of her own kids. So she would look after me on a Friday night. And she really was my mother figure. She would invest in me. She would buy me books about the human body, bugs, dinosaurs, all this kind of stuff. And she would always pray for me. And that really was like my first kind of foray into faith and into Christianity and what that was like. So she would pray for me. And then on a Saturday, I'd go home back to this really horrific situation at home. So the abuse had been continuing, and my mother's drinking got worse. And around about the age of 8, I decided to tell my mum what had been happening with my cousin. And luckily, she believed me. And I know of stories that I've heard from people where that's not been the case, but my mum believed me. The police got involved, and it went to court, and he was found guilty and went to prison. When that happened, it became public knowledge what had been happening to me. Social services were now involved with the family. And when I returned to school after a break, I started getting bullied, and kids were calling me names like bum boy, and they were attacking me on the way home from school. And I became a victim again, even in that scenario. And that followed me from primary school to secondary school. And so I learned how to fight. I just had to defend myself. And so I started scrapping and getting in fist fights and getting in trouble at school, and got to the age of 14, 15. And my mum came home drunk and decided that I'm old enough now to look after myself. And she threw me out on the streets. So I'm at 15 years of age, and I find myself living in a skip at the back of Curry's, one of these big metal skips with a lid on it. And it was full of cardboard and polystyrene. And again, just a dark, dark time. And I often had nightmares about this period of my life, because when I was inside that skip, kids would come by and play football. And so they would kick the ball against the side of the skip while I was inside it. And every time that ball hit, it just thundered. And I feared for my life. I didn't want to be found. I didn't want them to know that I was there. What would they do if they found me? Would I be hurt? Would I be attacked? I didn't know what to do. And eventually, when I got to the age of 16, I managed to find through the council a hostel in Bradford. So I moved from Keighley to Bradford to a homeless hostel called Bradford Foyer. And you would think that, okay, I've got a roof over my head now, things are going to start improving. Well, actually, the homeless hostel was full of people who were aggressive and violent, and they were into drugs, and people were self-harming. And it was another one of those environments where it was kind of kill or be killed. And if you can't stand up for yourself, then they're going to take everything they can from you. My room was robbed multiple times, and I ended up getting into, again, quite a few fights. All I wanted to do was to get out of there. All I wanted to do was get a job, find my own place, kind of get my life back on track. And then I came into contact with a group of people from a local church who were coming in on a Tuesday and a Wednesday night, and they were teaching us how to cook meals. So they were teaching us how to make corned beef hash and spaghetti bolognese and all this kind of stuff. So I was learning from these guys how to cook. And all they did was encourage me. They didn't have anything negative to say. They just encouraged me. And again, this thread of, oh, would you like us to pray for you? Well, my nan used to pray for me. Yeah, sure, not a problem. And so they would pray for me, and then I would go back to this rough situation. I eventually found a job and was able to get enough money to find my own place and move out. It took a couple of years, 2 years, I think it was, that I was there for. And I had a partner at this point. I got myself a girlfriend, and everything seemed to be going really well, I thought. But what was going on really internally was I was still struggling to find my identity, who I was. You know, having a job was great, but actually I struggled keeping jobs. So I would bounce from job to job to job, and I started racking up some debts and started struggling with managing a household and paying the bills and all this kind of stuff. Again, this is all alien to me. No one had ever taught me how to run a household. And so I kind of bounced around through this. And the girl I was with, we decided one day to come over to Bradford to get some piercings. And I've got a bit of metal in my face. I've got one in my eyebrow and some other things. And when we came to Bradford, we just bumped into this couple, and they knew my partner, and they were like really happy to see each other. And they invited us back to their house to kind of hang out and drink some beers, play some video games. And we became really good friends with this couple. So every other weekend we'd travel over and we'd stay over the night. And again, this thread comes back through. So one Sunday morning, they said to us, oh, you know, since you've stayed over, do you fancy coming to church with us before you go home? And I was like, yeah, sure, not a problem. Yeah, let's go to church. Again, reminded of my grandmother and these guys at the hostel, and just being like, oh, you know, there'll be an organ, there'll be pews, there'll be a vicar and all this stuff. I better get ready to do communion. Maybe I should, spray a bit of deodorant on so I don't smell too bad. And we rocked up to this church. It's St. John's Church in Bradford on Wakefield Road. And it looked like a Catholic church from outside, but when we got inside, there was a live band, and there was open seating, and there was space for people to dance. There were kids running around. There was hot coffee as you came in. There was biscuits, and everyone just seemed really happy and joyful and happy to see me. And these are total strangers to me. And they said, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. What's your name?" And so I was kind of blown away a bit by this. What's going on? And so we went into the main hall, and I sat on the second row. Didn't sit on the front row. I thought, I'll sit on the second row. I don't want people to think I'm too eager, too keen. And the worship started, and so the live band's playing, and they're singing these songs about love. And so I'm singing away and just trying not to sing too loud, just enough so people see my mouth moving. And next thing I know, I find myself kind of struggling with this emotion, I'm starting to blubber a little bit. I'm starting to there's a tear strolling down my face, and I'm like, my heart is wrenching. I'm like, what is going on? What is happening? And I found myself just blubbering during this song. My heart was ripped open, and I couldn't control it. I'm trying to suck it in, just like, oh, I'm a hard man. Hard men don't cry. And here I am just blubbering at this song about love. And after the service, I got myself back together, and this guy came over to me, and he was like, "Oh, hey, I saw you crying during the worship." And I was like, "Nah, you didn't see me crying, mate. You didn't see me crying. I was sweating. I ran up the hill. I wasn't crying. That's not what you saw." He's like, "No, I saw you crying. You were a blubbering mess, mate. I saw you crying. Let me tell you why you were crying." And I was like, "Okay, I'll entertain you." But I wasn't crying, but I'll entertain you. You tell me what you think was going on there. And he looked me dead in the eyes, and he said, "You've just felt love for the first time in your life, and you didn't know what to do with it." And he hit the nail on the head. that was exactly what was going on. I had felt love for the first time, and I did not know what to do with it. The only way I could cope with it was by trying to restrain the emotion. And actually, that was just not working. The emotion was too strong. The pull was too strong. And he said, you need to give this church thing a go. You need to give Jesus a chance to love you and be loved. And so I went on this journey of trying to figure out the whole church thing. You know, we went every Saturday night because I had a Saturday night gathering for younger, hip people who didn't want to get up on a Sunday morning. And so I went along to the Saturday night, and we were going for, I think it was about 8 or 9 months. And I was in a home church, and we were studying the Bible together, and I was trying to figure it all out and asking all these questions. And me and my partner had got engaged, and so we were planning to get married. And I was quite confident in being able to have a conversation and engage with faith, but I wasn't truly kind of submitted to it, if you want to call it that. I was still kind of a bit standoff. I was still kind of a bit, I don't want to go too deep here. I don't really want to be too vulnerable. And so my wedding day came along, and I'm there looking all nice and wearing a suit, and I got a bit of streak of purple in my hair, and because I was a bit of a rocker. And my grandmother was there. She was sat there, and my grandmother had been suffering with dementia for a couple of years at this point. So she wasn't very well. She was quite frail, had forgotten quite a lot of her family members. But on my wedding day, she was there, and from across the room, I just heard this random shout. She's from Connethley, South Wales. She had a really thick Welsh accent, and she just goes, "Gareth, will you wash that purple out your hair? You look stupid." And I was just like, oh, that's my grandmother right there. The dementia for a moment was non-existent, and my grandmother was shouting at me across the room. And there's a photo on my wedding day of me with my wife, and she's in a wheelchair in front of us, and she wheeled the chair backwards, and the handle caught me in the groin just as someone took a photo. So my grandmother is sat there with a big smirk on her face, and I'm stood behind her, like kind of scrunched over. And she wheeled herself forward and looked over her shoulder and just gave a little laugh and went, "Ha ha, I got you." And I was just like, amazing, amazing. And it was a great day. It was a lovely day. I felt top of the world. The next morning, I'm in the hotel room, and I'm having a shower, just kind of getting freshened up. And the phone went, and my brother was calling, my youngest brother. And my wife was like, "You need to answer the phone. You need to answer the phone. It's really serious. You need to answer the phone." So I picked it up, and I was a little bit annoyed. I'm like, "Look, it's it's the day after my wedding day. Please don't be ringing me. Can you leave it alone?" And he was in tears on the phone, and he said, "Gaz, Nan's dead." My grandmother had gone home that night. She'd gone to sleep, and she didn't wake up. And her final day was my wedding day. And my world had gone from such a high to a very, very deep low. And I got angry, and I blamed God, and I blamed everybody else around me. And I became really, really distraught by this. And it was really, really hard. I found out not long afterwards that the woman I just got married to had been having an affair, and she left me, and I was then unemployed. I lost my job. I was depressed, and I'd gone back to living in a box room. I was living in a room that was no bigger than this front room that I'm in now, and it had all of my belongings in. And I just looked up to the sky, and I was like, I thought I was on the winning team. I thought you become a Christian, everything's okay. That couldn't have been any further from the truth for me at that point. And so I distanced myself from the church. I distanced myself from the friends I had made. And I just went in. I just went in on myself, put my walls up, and tried to deal with it. And I just wasn't. Then a guy called Dave Kendall came and knocked on the door. And he was from the church, and he was a guy I'd made friends with. And he pretty much just barged his way into the shared house that I was living in. He sat me down on the couch, got me a coffee, and he said, "Look, mate, we need to help you get your life back on track. God has got something for you. He is for you. Jesus is for you. Let's be honest. Crap happens. People die. Relationships end. Life happens. But Jesus doesn't want any of that for us. But we have to get through it. And by having Jesus, we can get through it better, and we can get through it stronger, and we can get through it in a community of people who will care for us and love us. And we can have a deep sense of identity in something other than the people and the relationships around us and the things that may potentially hurt us. And I was like, okay, you're talking a bit of gibberish to me, but what do I do with this then? And so he said, let's go backwards into your past. Let's deal with all of this hurt and this anger and this bitterness and this unforgiveness that you've got from all the rubbish that's happened. And let's try and get you back on track. So we went on this journey together. We went through this book called 12.5 Steps to Spiritual Health. And one of the steps in that is like making a real long list and account of all the bad stuff you've done and going to people and asking them to forgive you, but then also going to all of those people who hurt you and forgiving them. So I got in touch with my mum and we had a very long discussion about my childhood. I found my dad. He's now part of my life. I got to see him over Christmas, over video call, and I got to see him on Father's Day. So me and him restored our relationship. I got things back on track with my ex-wife. We hadn't divorced, so we tried to give the relationship another go. It didn't work out. We did end up divorcing in the end, but it was amicable and there was no like bad feelings or anything. We just thought, you know what, if this isn't going to work, it isn't going to work. So we put the relationship down and I moved on. And then we got stuck. We got stuck on my abuser because the last thing I knew, he was in prison. And that was, 10 years ago, something like that. So I had no clue where to start. I asked my family if they knew where he was. No one knew where he was. It was a bit of a dead end. So I was like, well, what do I do? And Dave said, well, the first thing you can do in any situation is pray about it. And I was like, okay, cool. So it was a very simple prayer, quite a bold prayer, but very simple. And I just said, look, God. It was almost like I was giving him a demand. It was like, look, God, if you're real, and I think you are, and if Jesus is for me, and I think he is, you need to help me deal with this one thing. I need you to help me be able to forgive the guy who put me through so much pain and hurt and set my life off on a totally different trajectory. I need you to help me forgive him. If you can do that, then I'm all in. You've got me. I'm all in. I will drop the walls. I will be vulnerable. I will give you everything I've got. I will fully submit. And I got myself a job. I was back working. So the next day I go into work as usual. And I was working at a CEX store. So I don't know if you know them. You see them in towns all over the country. They trade video games and stuff. So I was working in one of those stores and my abuser walked in and joined the queue. So I'm at work the day after this prayer. Now my abuser walks in and joins the queue. So at this moment, there's a lot of feelings going on. I'm feeling like I could jump the counter, run down. I'd been doing wrestling training for about a year or so at this point. I could body slam him into the floor and make him feel what I felt. I could run away. I could take a break. I could try and avoid him. Or I could deal with it. And I could take the opportunity that God has placed in front of me to do something about it. So he starts coming down the queue. He starts coming down the queue and he's getting closer. And lo and behold, I had to serve him. I had to serve my abuser. So he gives me his empty DVD cases and we glanced at each other briefly. And I got a real sense that he was just as scared about this interaction as I was. I could see it in his eyes. He was shaking as he handed me his DVDs. I turned my back on him and got the CDs, put them in the cases, come back to the till, cashed it through. He gave me his money. And as I handed him back the change, I grabbed his hand. I looked him dead in the eyes and I said, I forgive you for what you did. I forgive you. And as I let go of his hand, it was almost like I've been carrying an elephant on my back all my life, and it had just dropped off. My chest came out, the weightlessness. I was a little bit like, whoa, what is this? And then I took a break. Then I went upstairs and washed my face. I was just blown away. How can I deny something like that? I could not pin this to coincidence. I could not pin this to anything other than I prayed for it, and God was like, all right, big man, there you go, deal with it.